The Emperor of the World holds the soon-to-be ascended dragon and tells bedtime stories, and he kept feeding him extra. In the previous episode, Yan Yuan bandaged Xuanlong's wound. After getting Hianlong's promise, no matter how much he makes mistakes in the future, he forgives him once, and he's in a good mood. Then he ordered the meal to be passed in. Yan Yuan heard Chen Yan say Xuanlong had a bad appetite, so he asked the Imperial Kitchen to make some fish and shrimp he liked. I want Hianlong to eat more, so I just kept giving him food. Xuanlong responded calmly, but faced with a small bowl of delicious food piled up in front of him, it was difficult. He's been having nausea for no reason lately. The smell of the oil that humans always put out when cooking gets worse, so the food was reduced from 3 meals a day to 1. Yan Yuan sees Xuanlong in a daze. Reach out and gather his long hair behind his ears, a handsome face with a dark gold mask exposed. Xuanlong came back to his senses and slowly finished the dishes in his bowl. He suppressed the tumult in his stomach, because besides Yan Yuan, no one's going to put food in his mouth and ask him if he's hungry. So he didn't want to reject Yan Yuan's kindness. If he loses it, no one will be nice to him. Yan Yuan saw him finish eating, so she served him a spoonful of rich chicken soup. Tell him to eat and rest early. I'll stay with him tonight. After washing up at night, Yan Yuan leaned against the bed with Xuanlong in her arms. I took a book from the library and told him. It tells the story of a snake demon and a rich man. The snake demon opened up a world of killing for the sake of cultivation. Later, she met a kind-hearted rich man and secretly fell in love with him. For him, the snake demon is willing to give up her cultivation, abandoning evil and turning to good, only wanting to keep up with rich boys. But on his wedding night, he learned that she was a demon. So according to the Taoist's instructions, Realgar was added to the wine. When the snake demon revealed its true form, he stabbed her 7 inches with a dagger. Hianlong was sleepy and his consciousness drifted away. Hearing this, I suddenly woke up. Turn around and ask Yan Yuan why he is so. Didn't he love her? Yan Yuan muttered to herself. He was afraid. Xuanlong asked Yan Yuan why he was afraid. In my opinion, even if it is a demon. For worthy people are willing to pay their lives to love. Yan Yuan caressed his cheek as if comforting him. To be frank, the snake demon once harmed people, and the demon has a different way. Hearing the words transvestite, Xuanlong's eyes were filled with confusion. Ask Yan Yuan uncertainly if it means that humans and demons cannot be together. Yan Yuan nodded. Xuanlong did not know what to say for a moment. It took me a long time to say, I've never hurt anyone. Yan Yuan took him into his arms affectionately. We're different. It's meant to be. A couple that won't be hindered by the world. He closed his mouth and tightened Hianlong's grip. For a moment, a cold fragrance made him feel difficult. So after a long gallop, Yan Yuan caressed Xuanlong's ear contentedly. I'm sorry, Po. I couldn't help it. Hianlong is exhausted. After a while, I managed to squeeze out a word that it was fine. Yan Yuan didn't intend to do this. He just wanted to come over and simply accompany Hianlong. Who knew that smell of cold will be out of control? He's even a little suspicious. Did Hianlong put something in the cold incense that made him lose control? But obviously that's impossible. Because it's been on Hianlong since the day we met. It's obviously natural. What's even more outrageous is that he thinks the blood and sweat from Xuanlong. It smells good, unlike humans. Blood smells like rust. Sweat smells even worse. Things seem to be spinning out of control. He wondered why he could never shake off Hianlong's charms. Is it because it's really too delicious? Or is it because he's only tasted this one? I thought that when Ningjiu wakes up, he won't be like this anymore. When the time comes, he'll let Hianlong go free. White Anime thinks so, but inside he was inexplicably uneasy, because he knew he wanted more than the dragon's scales, and cheated on Hian Ryong. He dared not think further. Smelling the cold fragrance from Xuanlong, he slowly closed his eyes. The emperor dreamed of his lover in his previous life, watching a man disappear in her arms and break his heart. But he doesn't know that his lover from his previous life is beside him. In the previous episode, the emperor smelled the cold fragrance of Xuanlong out of control. So after a long gallop, Yan Yuan and Xuanlong were content to sink into the deep sea of consciousness. In his sleep, he had a dream. In the dream, the war was raging, and the bodies were everywhere. The man fell into his arms. Face was covered in blood. He tried to wipe his face with his sleeve, but that bloody face can't be wiped clean. Instead, it tore the wound on the man's face and hurt him. The despair and sadness of the death surged in Yan Yuan's chest. He's scared. He's scared men will leave him forever, so he hugged him and covered his chest with blood, begging him not to die. The man seems to be smiling at him. Her mouth, which was bubbling blood, was trembling slowly, saying something to him. Yan Yuan couldn't hear or see the man's face clearly, and whining in my ears. Yan Yuan broke down and cried, because he noticed that men were starting to stop talking. No matter how much he pleads. Finally, the man died in his arms, until the body turns into a black spark and disappears bit by bit. Yan Yuanmo can't wake up from nightmare, his eyebrows furrowed. He wondered if Yan Yuan was feeling unwell. He got up and wanted to ask before, but Yan Yuan suddenly stopped him. Tell him not to talk to himself. The dream was like a wake-up call. Remind Yan Yuan not to betray Yu again. He has to restrain himself and stay away from Hyunlong. Chen Yan was waiting outside the hall when he came out. Seeing his ugly face, he carefully asked him what was wrong. Yan Yuan left in a hurry after saying go to Phoenix Palace. The rain became heavier. When Yan Yuan arrived at the Phoenix Palace, she was soaked. He did not care, stumbling to Ning Jiyu's bedside. Grab a man's hand and put it on your face. At this moment, he felt that he was truly alive. That dream was so painful. Yan Yuan had dreamed of that scene countless times. You can't see a man's face clearly, and that despair gripped him, like it was eating away at his bones. He wanted to die with the man of his dreams. That's a man more important than his own life. From the age of 14, he meets men almost every night in his dreams. Every time it's like that. Every time I wake up, my pillow is always wet. But he couldn't see a man's face every time. He guessed it must have been his lover in a previous life. Otherwise, how could he be so stubborn and strange into his dreams? 16 is the best age for kings, met the chosen one. But he missed out on the love of his past life. The emperor dreamed of his lover in his previous life, and fled the dragon. Since he was 14, he's been dreaming about meeting his lover. He guessed that his lover wanted him to find him, but Yan Yuan, as the crown prince, didn't even leave the palace several times. He didn't know where to find it. Automatic diffusion can only wait for the other party to find themselves. Yan Yuan waited and waited. I've waited a long time, but I haven't waited until my 16th birthday. Father said he would choose one of the daughters of the noble family to be his crown princess. He refused. Without thinking, he knew he loved a man, but he's convinced he'll come. That summer, Yan Yuan met Ning Jiyu. The man's bloody face became clear in the dream. Ning Jiyu was 17 years old at that time, a year older than Yan Yuan. He looks like a breeze, but he's soft. His mother was an anonymous foot-washing girl, and died in childbirth. Therefore, Ning Jiyu is the son of a prime minister, but secretly anyone can step on it. The prime minister doesn't care much anyway. This sickly son. When Yan Yuan met Ning Jiyu, he is being forced by his brother to pick up a kite from a tree. Just as he was about to touch the kite, he suddenly stepped on air and fell. The stone on the forehead hit the ground and broke his head. Ning Hong, the prime minister's son, saw his cheap brother injured. Knowing that he had caused trouble, he slipped away. Ning Jiyu turned to him at that moment. Yan Yuan's heart was suddenly hit. He looked at Ning Jiyu with blood all over his face. Think of the man's bloody face in the dream. I was so sad. He doesn't know who he's hurting. Is it the man in the dream or the man in front of you? He can't tell the difference. Ning Jiyu staggered out of the garden. Yan Yuan reached out and held him up. Ning Jiyu has never met the prince. Just think of him as someone's son. He shook his head with a smile. It was a sad, helpless smile. But Mo Ming and Yan Yuan's dream man's face completely match. He couldn't help but wonder, is it him? After a moment, Yan Yuan muttered, how could it not hurt? Ning Jiyu is still smiling. It doesn't hurt when you get used to it. He has beautiful eyes. Yan Yuan felt that the man in the dream and smiling. It should be like this. A pair of gentle eyes. So she gently asked him to follow her, and promised to protect him from now on. In this way, Ning Jiyu became the emperor's companion. He wouldn't do anything heavier. Just let him grind ink and wash pens by his side. It hurts like a baby, but ever since he started dating Ning Jiyu, Yan Yuan never had that dream again. As time went on, their relationship grew stronger. Gradually, he became convinced that Ning Jiyu was the one in the dream. But last night he did it again. That heart-wrenching dream. He thinks Ning Jiyu is blaming him. Mutter to make Ning Jiyu not angry, and promised he would never see Hyunlong again.
For the first time, an emperor of this world has left the palace with Xuanlong, who has cultivated for 10,000 years. I didn't expect you to bring me to the place to cut your talent. The emperor hid from Hyunlong for days for fear of sinking too deep. During this period, I was extremely anxious, but I thought about it, whether it's for Ning Jiyu's health or for Xuanlong's concern. Now he has a reason to meet Xuanlong. So immediately, under the feet of the wind, came to Changkun Palace. Yan Yuan saw Xuanlong's back through the window. All the thoughts accumulated for many days poured into my heart instantly. He had mixed feelings, then slowly pushed the door open and entered. Xuanlong looked up and saw that it was him, subconsciously hiding the wooden man. I don't know how Xuanlong will react. He sat still. The emperor stopped in front of him. Raise your hand and touch his cheek gently. Ask Hyunlong how he's doing and if he misses him. Then, without waiting for Xuanlong's answer, he leaned forward and hugged her, and whispered in his ear, I miss you so much. Hyunlong was at a loss. Aren't you angry? Yan Yuan let go of her hand, explaining that it wasn't about him. Then he held Hunryong's hand and apologized to him. He said that if he committed any more crimes, Hun Xuanlong would throw him out. Xuanlong looked at Yan Yuan for a moment and retracted his gaze. He said in a low voice that he had never been with anyone before. If there's something wrong, just say it. If Yan Yuan said bluntly that he hated him, he'll leave without a word. Yan Yuan heard this and held Xuanlong in her arms. You're not bad, I'm bad. And promise me that I won't do it again. Let Xuanlong not hate himself. Xuanlong raised his head and looked at him. I never hated you. Yan Yuan smiled with relief. He knew Hyunlong was always the best to him. When I touched Xuanlong's finger, I suddenly felt something wrong. Look down. I saw that pair of slender and beautiful fingers. It's covered in tiny scratches. Some are already closed. Yan Yuan quickly asked what was going on. Xuanlong withdrew his hand after realizing it. It means you accidentally did it. It doesn't matter. Yan Yuan suddenly frowned and held onto his hand, worried about how there are so many wounds caused by accident. Hyunlong doesn't want to say much. He won't have to worry. He'll be fine. Yan Yuan is waiting to catch up. But thinking of Xuanlong's temperament, he sighed. It means he'll be angry if he doesn't recover in a few days. Xuanlong nodded in agreement, pulled his shirt and shook it a few times. Yan Yuan was immediately amused by this cute move. Cover your mouth and laugh. Then he held Hyunlong and said he would take him to a good place later. After dinner, for the first time, the emperor took Xuanlong out of the Changkun Palace. An hour later, a place like a folk courtyard appeared in front of us. Xuanlong doesn't understand why Yan Yuan brought him here. I'm in a daze. Suddenly, a pair of arms slowly embraced him from behind. Yan Yuan's chin rested on his shoulder. Soft voice explained that this is Yan Bing Xiaoju. He'd come over for a few days in his spare time. I'm worried that Hyunlong will be in a bad mood all day, so I brought him here to relax and ask Xuanlong if he is happy. As long as Yan Yuan is around, it's the best for him. I don't know when the accompanying palace people were dismissed. They're the only ones left. Yan Yuan silently hugged him in his arms. Suddenly, a pleasant cold fragrance came to my face. The emperor could no longer bear it, and Shady asked Hyunlong to help him. But Hyunlong refused. He grabbed Yan Yuan's wrist. I'm tired today. Yan Yuan saw that she was rejected and left angrily. Hyunlong looked at his back. The pale corners of his mouth moved. I wanted to call him, but I couldn't. Because he knew, those who really want to leave can't be kept, I thought. Let him be. Yan Yuan thought Xuanlong would catch up, but I didn't hear anything behind me when I got to the courtyard door, so I got even angrier. After a while, he stormed back the way he came. I can't help but say something hurtful. However, as soon as he approached, he was stunned. Xuanlong leaned on the wooden pillar with a pale face. Yan Yuan felt that something was wrong and began to get nervous for no reason. Step up and ask him what's wrong. You feeling unwell? Xuanlong was shaken a few times before he opened his eyes. Ask Yan Yuan why he wants to come back. Yan Yuan frowned and said, how can I really leave you? It's just a bluff. As he spoke, he lifted Xuanlong up. Quick step inside. How could he forget? This dragon looks cold, but it's pure. I don't know how to coax people. Xuanlong leaned on Yan Yuan's shoulder and felt warm in his heart. Then he asked Yan Yuan not to be angry with him easily in the future. Don't even talk about leaving him, because Yan Yuan's words will be taken seriously. Xuanlong, who has cultivated for 10,000 years, is actually doing this for the child of the emperor of the world, willing to pay for 1,000 years of practice. He found that his abdominal pain was not stopping, so he came to the dragons for help from the holy doctor. The holy doctor advised him to kill the dragon spirit, but he couldn't bear to. Hyunlong knew about this holy doctor when he was young. No matter what kind of demon or ghost, we will not refuse anyone. You only have to pay enough to get medical treatment. The old man walked into the house without looking back. Come in with me. Since you're not easy to see now, let's skip the 100. Xuanlong thanked him and slowly followed him into the room. The old man saw that he was in great pain. Take out a white jade bottle and pass it to him to drink. Frowning, toning and stopping bleeding. Drink it and then I'll do the magic. It's up to fate whether we can keep it or not. After Xuanlong finished drinking, a strange warmth rose in his stomach. It actually eased the pain. A moment later, the old man sat down opposite him. To be frank, Xuanlong needs to put the fetus in the abdomen like this. The incomplete spirit body is recalled and reshaped. It hurts a little bit. Let Xuanlong endure it. Close your palm and form a green orb. And pushed him in the stomach, without saying anything. Hyunlong was in so much pain that the veins on the back of his hand popped. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead like rain. Thinking that Yan Yuan was still waiting for him, I can't help but secretly encourage myself to get better earlier. The old man couldn't help but persuade him when he saw his suffering. It is selfish to tell others the truth. One day Hyunlong will understand. Today's suffering is a joke. Xuanlong did not refute when he heard this. Pretend you didn't hear it. After 4 hours, the old man withdrew his hand. You're lucky the dragon spirit survived. But it's another matter whether you can be born smoothly. Xuanlong thanked him and fell asleep. The morning after 2 eyes, the old man came early to check on Xuanlong's recovery. When I examined him, I found that he still had an old disease. So he took out the fairy muscle powder and healed the wound. At this moment, Xuanlong slowly woke up. When I got up, I found that my stomach was no longer painful. He quickly thanked the old man and condensed a spirit ball at his fingertips. Prepare to pass the 1,000-year-old path to the old man, who knew that the old man's figure flashed and instantly moved to him. Without hesitation, he lifted his hand and bounced the spirit ball back into Xuanlong's body. Xuanlong widened his eyes in confusion. The old man turned his back and said faintly, "You can pay your debts after you've survived the disaster. I don't want you to mess in." He told Xuanlong to eat too if he felt sick in his stomach. And then, without any trouble, he also stuffed some dry food for Xuanlong to eat on the road. After doing this, the old man can safely push Xuanlong to leave quickly. Xuanlong watched the old man walk back into the house. He's got no expression on his face. But the bottom of my heart is warm. Ever since he was banished from the dragon race, besides old man Yan Yuan, he's the second person who treats him well. This way, Phoenix Hall. The emperor is feeding Ning Ziyu, who has just woken up for a few days, medicine. When I heard Xiao Dezi say that Xuanlong had not been found, I was immediately furious. If you can't find the head, don't want it. When the emperor heard that Ning Ziyu had awakened, see Xuanlong asleep, he hurried down the mountain alone with his entourage. Leave Xiao Dezi outside to guard. When I came back, I found that the building was empty. He rummaged back and forth, and I couldn't find half a shadow of Xuanlong. Ning Ziyu looked at Yan Yuan, who was unusually irritable, with a difficult expression on her face. I wonder why he's always getting so angry these days. He always lectured the palace people. At this moment, Chen Yan came forward to report that someone was asked. After 10,000 years of cultivation, Xuanlong returned to the palace again after having a child. But he didn't know that the emperor's doctor. He's trying to get his inner core. After he returned from the holy doctor, he went straight back to Qiankun Palace. At this moment, Xuanlong is sitting at the table. He wanted to tell Yan Yuan about the dragon spirit. But then I was afraid Yan Yuan wouldn't accept it. After all, even he thought it was incredible. Just as he was thinking, Yan Yuan pushed the door open and entered. Angry, "Where have you been these past 2 days? Why didn't you let me know?" Yu Baidong was really annoyed by Xuanlong's silence. Baidong Xuanlong stood up slowly to explain that he went back to Gutan to get something. Tell Yan Yuan not to be angry. The emperor looked at him for a moment and turned away. But he stopped after 2 steps. "Do you know what I mean? I'm worried about anime when you leave without telling me." He pulled his shirt off. Then I thought of the method Xiao Dezi taught me last time. He turned around and poured a cup of tea. The emperor looked at Xuanlong, who had a sincere face, and finally lost his breath. Then he took Xuanlong into his arms. "I miss you so much." As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar cold fragrance assaulted him. People say that a small parting is better than a new marriage, and this is true. Yan Yuan subconsciously had an idea. The next second, he pushed Hianlong down without caring. "When you open your skirt," to his surprise, Xuanlong's chest was intact. I can't help but be overjoyed. "Are your injuries all healed?" Hunlong nodded shyly. Yan Yuan wanted to continue, but Wanlong stopped her. He can't let the dragon spirit get hurt. Yan Yuan saw that he was not happy, and could only give up. Hand to forehead, ask Xuanlong about the latest. Xuanlong shook his head. He wanted to wait for the right moment. Then tell Yan Yuan about the dragon spirit. If this man can't accept Wig. He went back to Gutan alone to take care of Longling. Next morning, the emperor went to Fengluan Palace. When embracing Ning Jiyu, I accidentally smelled the cold fragrance on my body. Ning Jiyu was stunned for a moment. As far as he knows, the kite is allergic to pollen and never uses spices. He asked out with full of doubt. Yan Yuan froze instantly when she heard this. Then Tang Sai said that maybe there was a flower smell on the way here. Ning Jiyu was skeptical. After a while, hold Yan Yuan's hand and tell him not to leave tonight. Stay and rest together. They've never been married together. Yan Yuan's heart quivered. He and Ning Jiyu have always been affectionate and polite, never crossed the line. Ning Jiyu's sudden suggestion made him somewhat at a loss. He subconsciously pulled his hand back. "Embarrassed, you have a beautiful body. Let's talk about it when you're ready." At this time, the servant handed over the cooked medicinal food. This. And then he flapped his sleeve. Furious, he said, "You're a quack. You're useless. I knew what Dragonheart wanted you for." After a while, he calmed down and repeatedly confirmed with Zonghua. "Is there anything else in this world besides the heart of the dragon? Is there really nothing else that can save Yu's life?" Zonghua was silent for a moment. "But it's harder to get than Dragonheart." Yan Yuanyi listened to the spirit. "Ask him what he is." Zonghua raised his head and looked at Yan Yuan. "One word at a time. The dragon's inner core. White anime Dragonheart can be taken out when the dragon is unprepared. The inner core is the spiritual core condensed from the dragon's spiritual power. If you are not willing to spit out white animation, others are unable to get." Yan Yuan thought for a moment. "Ask if you will die if you lose your inner core." Zonghua shook his head and said he would not. It just becomes human. The emperor of the world saved his queen. To coax Xuanlong, who has cultivated for nearly 10,000 years, to hand over his inner core. But Hyunlong turned around and disappeared. Imperial physician Zonghua suggested that if the emperor did not want to take the dragon heart to save the queen, inner core can also be. Besides, dragons don't die if they lose their inner cores. But it's going to be human. It's going to be cool. Yan Yuan sat behind the table in the dim candlelight of the palace hall, stinging at the memorial in front of him, but not reading a word. All he can think about is what Zonghua said earlier. The inner core isn't like dragon scales. It can grow again. If he asks Xuanlong if he can give it to him, it's better than dragon heart. At least, you can live without your inner core. Just thinking about the weak voice of the queen in the inner hall pulled him back to reality. He quickly got up and rushed to the inner hall. Ning Jiyu trembled as she supported herself on the bed. Tell me you had a dream. Dreaming that Yan Yuan likes someone else. The emperor felt ashamed and crazy when he heard this. Ning Jiyu must have noticed something. So he lowered his head and comforted her softly and vowed to love him alone in this life. If there is a different heart, the country will change its master and die a bad death. Ning Jiyu was moved to tears when she heard this. After this incident, Yan Yuan strengthened her wavering heart. After he settled Ning Ziyu, he rushed towards the Changkun Palace. When I arrived at Changkun Palace, I saw Xuanlong in the courtyard, soaking in the rain. The scene before him made him familiar. There was a piercing pain in his chest. He doesn't know what's happening to him. But right now, I don't care. After taking Xuanlong back to the pavilion, the two of them ate some snacks one bite at a time. Yan Yuan finally said that he did not want to say. But I had to say something. Do you have a spiritual core called inner core condensed from spiritual energy? Can I have it? His voice quivered as he said it. I'm afraid Hianlong will agree, but I'm more afraid of being rejected. This ambivalence has tortured him. Xuanlong heard this and couldn't help but ask him what he wanted the inner core for. Yan Yuan explained that his friend was ill. It takes inner core to heal. Xuanlong hasn't said anything for a long time. Seeing that he did not speak, the emperor quickly explained softly. He knew that without his inner core, Xuanlong would become no different from a mortal. But this way, we can grow old together forever. Is it very good? That sounds pretty tempting, but what does he know? If Xuanlong loses his inner core, he won't last more than a year, let alone grow old together. Besides, the dragon spirit in your belly needs to be fed by your inner core. If he loses it, he could die with him. If you want to go to Xuanlong, return to Dao, and don't leave your inner core. Yan Yuan felt annoyed when she heard his answer. He doesn't want to hurt Hianlong, but without the inner core, Ningjiu will die, just like him. I don't want to give it now, but I don't want to grow old with myself. So the more I think about it, the angrier I get. I turn around and leave. Xuanlong took out the wooden figure he had made before. Give it to him to calm him down, but it obviously didn't work. If it were anyone else, he would have been dragged out and killed. But this person is Xuanlong. Yan Yuan can't. But I'm really angry. Therefore, in a fit of anger, he said nothing and let Xuanlong go. I don't want to see him anymore. Hianlong doesn't understand why he's suddenly so angry. Yan Yuan's voice is exhausted. She hates you. I don't like you, okay? Xuanlong nodded, his heart full of mixed feelings. These words pierced his heart like a steel cone. A moment later, he had the answer in his mind. So he turned around and walked towards the door, without hesitation. A few steps later, he disappeared from the hall. Yan Yuan immediately regretted seeing him leave. Send men everywhere to search. Crazy, screaming into the sky. Come back, I forbid you to leave. The search failed, and he came to Changkun Palace with a fluke mentality. Who knew that when I turned around, I saw it? Xuanlong floated in the hall. Hianlong was supposed to leave. But when I heard Yan Yuan shouting desperately, I softened my heart again. He couldn't bear to leave Yan Yuan. The emperor took him in his arms. He thought Hunryong really left, and now to see him standing right in front of her, I'm sad and happy. As if a lost treasure had been found, he spoke hoarsely to Xuanlong, explaining that what he said was angry. Don't make Xuanlong angry. If you don't feel relieved, just stick and say hello. But how could Xuanlong hurt him? He wasn't really angry, he was just sad. When Yan Yuan saw that his anger had subsided, she wrapped him up. He said he'd make up for it with Lao Xuanlong. Xuanlong had no choice but to obey. The two of them are sweet when things are done. Suddenly, an urgent message came from the border outside the door. Said there was a fox in the army. Hundreds of soldiers died in the streets. Even the invited alchemists have gone and never returned. Pregnant mystic dragon versus beautiful fox demon. Who knew that Xuan Longjing accidentally fell into his arms? The emperor received an urgent report from the border that a fox demon was causing trouble then. Hundreds of wounded soldiers, even the sorcerers sent out, never returned. Yan Yuan was furious when she heard this. Xuanlong knows that demons don't hurt people easily. So he asked if the army had done anything to piss him off. Chen Yan shook his head and said he did not know. Yan Yuan looked at Xuanlong and immediately had an idea. He wants Hyunlong to kill the demon for him. Xuanlong pursed his lips and remained silent. Recently, my spiritual power has weakened. I'm afraid this will affect the dragon spirit. But after thinking for a moment, I agreed. Yan Yuan saw that he promised to relax, a smile on his face to show his gratitude. The emperor asked Xuanlong if he had any reward he wanted. Xuanlong shook his head. He just wants to be with Yan Yuan, and nothing else. After a long time, I suddenly remembered something. Asked Yan Yuan hesitantly if dragons can reproduce with humans. Yan Yuan looked puzzled as to what he thought. If you have children with a beautiful dragon girl, it should also be very beautiful. Xuanlong was excited when he heard this. Is that what you think? After receiving Yan Yuan's affirmative reply, he was even more delighted. I thought Yan Yuan was so beautiful. The child must be pretty good looking. If I can return safely from this trip. He told the truth about his dragon spirit. Early the next morning, Yan Yuan bid farewell to Xuanlong. When Hyunryong gets to the border, it took me 3 days to find a way. Find out where the fox is hiding. The fox demon teleported to his side in the blink of an eye. He blew a breath in Xuanlong's ear playfully. Ask Hyunlong why he's following him. Xuanlong quickly broke free from the shackles and distanced himself from it. A black sword appeared in his hand, and then he struck the man with lightning speed. Who knew that the man's reaction was rapid and disappeared instantly? Xuanlong thought bad, but before he could react, and then suddenly someone yanks my arm. Xuanlong fell into the man's arms without warning. The man took the opportunity to lift his chin. Are you also interested in me because of your beauty? Xuanlong quickly used teleportation to break free from the shackles. You are the fox demon, the man said coldly. The ice blue eyes looked him up and down calmly. So what? You're a demon too. Hyunlong calmly asked him why he killed. The man raised his chin slightly. He asked Hyunlong to mind his own business. Hyunlong thinks he's about the same age as Yan Yuan. Patiently persuade him to stop in time. Do not fall into the devil, who knows that the fox demon is not grateful. To be frank, he has never been afraid of anyone in his life, and threatened those mortals who saw beauty and could not move. He kills everyone he sees. We're desperate. We'll take care of Hyunlong too. As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly approached Xuanlong. Hyunlong held his sword to his chest. He promised himself to be rid of evil. If Li stops, he'll let it go. I'm too lazy to argue with him. Waving the whip in his hand, he attacked Xuanlong directly. The two fought for dozens of rounds and were evenly matched. If Xuanlong is at his peak, we can take it down in minutes. But right now, the dragon spirit in his belly has exhausted most of his spiritual power. Even if we try our best, we can only draw. Xuanlong wanted to finish the battle quickly, but suddenly, there was a huge pain in his abdomen. He subconsciously covered his lower abdomen with his hand. The next second, the whip hit him right in the chest. The dragon was struck several feet away. The barbs cut deep into the body and instantly bled. Le frowned. As far as he knows, dragons have protective scales. I wonder why this dragon is so unbeaten. A moment later, he walked to Xuanlong and asked if there was anything wrong, and explained that he did not want to hurt Xuanlong. He had no choice. Xuanlong knew he couldn't take him down. So he went to the temple and took out a pill to take. Sit against the wall and close your eyes slowly. Tell Le to leave quickly and don't hurt anyone else. The mysterious dragon, who has been practicing for 10,000 years, actually fainted after fighting the handsome fox demon. The fox demon immediately picked him up by the waist. Xuanlong came to the border to eliminate demons for the emperor, but because the dragon spirit in his belly overdraws his spiritual power, he cannot take it down. He was also injured and vomited blood by a fox demon whip. No, he had to sit down against the wall slowly to ease the pain. I thought the fox demon would have taken the opportunity to escape. Who knew that he would see him squatting slowly in front of him? Curious, he asked Hyunlong who he was after. Xuanlong naturally won't give up the emperor. See him silent. Mello leaned forward and lifted the dragon's chin. To be frank, a dragon as deep as he is would have to volunteer. Otherwise, they won't be easily driven. I guess you're in love with the Terran, huh? Xuanlong's pupils dilated instantly. Li sees the situation and is more certain in his heart. He couldn't help but mock Xuanlong for being so pitiful. Hyunlong was in so much pain, he didn't want to talk to him. Coldly tell him to leave without further harm. But when he talks about humans, his expression suddenly changes. It's like he hates humans. Resentful to Xuanlong about the reason for his injury. It turns out Le Ben had a brother. They lost their mother when they were young. One day he suggested that he come to the world to practice, and his brother readily agreed. But what he didn't expect, brother fell in love with a human prince. The prince coaxed his brother to say that he liked him. But I really want to peel off his fur to please his sweetheart. When Les saw his brother again, he was only alive. Leave a message, don't avenge yourself, and die. But he can't just let it go. He raised his hand and settled the prince and his sweetheart. It's like I can't control myself anymore. Screaming at Xuanlong, ask his brother what he did wrong to deserve this. Xuanlong didn't expect the reason to be like this. Speechless for a moment, Collar's voice choked up. In the eyes of the humans, they're all freaks. Terrans can be trusted for self-interest. When the time is right, skin them and cramp them. Get what you want. Then he looked at Xuanlong deeply. What will happen to you in the future? Xuanlong was suddenly frozen by his sharp eyes. After a long time, I looked down. Not everyone is what he says. But Li's next question undoubtedly gave Xuanlong a head start. Then, why don't you have your heart protecting dragon scales? Has nothing to do with that human. This sentence deeply pierced Xuanlong. The heart twitched for no reason, but he didn't dare to think any further. He quickly looked away to hide his inner panic. Denying the Tao has no meaning, but Joy seems to have seen through it. Hate iron, but not steel, said Xuanlong, self-deception hopeless. Then he turned around. He'll regret it sooner or later. Humans can't fall in love with a demon and leave. But after 2 steps, the berries stopped. Seeing no reaction behind him, he turned his head in confusion. Who knows when Xuanlong fainted? He crouched down to check. When I opened my shirt, I found a large amount of blood oozing from Xuanlong's chest. Joy panicked instantly. He didn't use his full strength in that whip. How could it hurt so badly? See? Xuanlong is still not awake posture. He just picked her up by the waist. Without saying anything, he flew out of the temple. The fox demon finds himself hopelessly in love with Xuanlong. Xuanlong and Hu Yao fight to vomit blood and lose consciousness. The fox demon picked him up by the waist. He ran out of the temple without saying anything. Flash, teleport, fly, walk. Soon after, he brought Xuanlong back, the cabin where he and his brother used to live. Then he called the old radish spirit who lived nearby. But the old man's diagnosis stunned him. What are you talking about? He's got a dragon spirit. Li could not believe his ears. He grabbed the old man by the collar. He raised his hand and was about to chop at him. The old man quickly held his head and begged for mercy. He said that what he said was true. This dragon does have a dragon spirit. The coma was caused by excessive blood loss and fetal qi. Le doubt. Then he asked the old man how to cure him fiercely. The old man handed him a package. There's some herbs inside for Lei to boil and feed to Xuanlong. Then he turned and left. After a while, I found the crock. According to the instructions of radish essence, boil the spirit grass. Then he walked over to Xuanlong's side. Feed him a mouthful with a spoon. But after a few spoonfuls, most of it came out. Li is worried to death. He used to be taken care of by his brother. I've never served anyone like this before. He thought about it and decided, and drink the jar into your mouth. The next second, he bent over and broke it open with his tongue. Although Li used beauty to deal with many scumbags, but I've never had such intimate contact with anyone before. He looked at Xuanlong's handsome eyebrows and his heart beat faster. Her cheeks flushed unconsciously. The next second, he reached out to touch Xuanlong's hair neck. Qianlong is asleep, breathing heavily. The pain all over his body made him shiver. I looked at his thin figure. My heart twitched for no reason. He said that the dragon was too troublesome. But in fact, he lay quietly beside Xuanlong, and then she carefully seemed a little excessive. Let Xuanlong not misunderstand proudly. He just didn't want people to think he was bullying patients. Xuanlong took the bowl and smiled lightly. And then tell Mello he's going home. Don't hurt anyone else. He didn't want to see music fall into evil. Li Yi panicked when he heard that he was going back to the human race. A gift. Stand up and turn over the stool, anxious to say that the Terran is asking you to work for him. All the love you say is a lie. If one day Xuanlong loses his value, he'll just throw him away. If you don't believe Xuanlong, you can try it when you go back. Xuanlong unconsciously tightened his throat. In fact, he has also noticed. I'm just kidding myself, not to think about it. Ko was pleased that he didn't answer and turned around angrily. Hyunryu will regret it. Humans can't love a demon. Actually, when I say these things, Le noticed his strange emotions. He realized that his feelings for Qianlong were different from his brother's. He doesn't want Qianlong to leave him. To have him all to yourself. To have him all to yourself. And finally admit he's facing his heart. He's hopelessly in love with Qianlong. Qianlong didn't notice his mood change. Eyes down, muttering, "Won't you fall in love?" But he wanted to gamble, and after a moment he sighed. "Leave a word you take care," then jumped straight into the air, running towards Chang'an.